and thus another chapter. We're going to hop right into chapter 13, which is, let me check real quick, just about, we're over halfway through the story. So let's get going with chapter 13. Morgan hadn't thought her headache could get worse. When she woke, lying half on top of Matt, she realized how very wrong she'd been. She groaned, rolling off him. How long had it been? Matt shifted, and she instantly felt guilty about making any noise, knowing that however much she hurt, he probably felt 5 times worse. She touched her head gingerly, feeling the blood crusted there. She winced, and carefully pushed herself upright, fighting to keep the contents of her stomach down as the world spun sickeningly. She squinted to try to mitigate some of the spinning, and spotted a tray with the usual food and water bowls. Morgan crawled over, knowing there was no way she'd be able to walk. She peered down, cringing and sitting back as the smell of the stew reached her. She took a deep breath to calm her stomach again. It wasn't particularly successful. "Morgan?" Matt asked, rolling carefully onto his side, one eye swollen shut and the other halfway there as well. She glanced back. "Don't move," she cautioned. "I'm getting some water." "I'm not dead." "Yet," Morgan muttered, but grabbed the tray and pushed it towards Matt, while working not to catch the smell again. She sat down next to him. "Stop moving," she ordered, as he shifted. "You're going to start bleeding again, and I only have so much water here." He scrunched up his face, peering at her. "You're bleeding too." "I was. I'm not anymore," she corrected, before very carefully peeling the sleeve of his shirt up. He sucked his breath in, wincing, but didn't protest as she worked it up around the nasty stab wound in his upper arm. "Sorry," she murmured. She felt Matt's gaze on her and barely managed to fight off her own wince at the damage. Morgan dipped the edge of her shirt into the water and dabbed at it, cringing every time he flinched. "Morgan, seriously," he croaked. "It's my own stupid fault." "So?" she asked, resolutely working to clear some of the blood from the injury. He shoved at her with his other hand. "So stop. Take care of yourself." "I'm fine." "No, you aren't. He got you good, too." She smiled wryly. "Not as much as you." Matt shrugged with his good shoulder. "Yeah, well, I provoked him, and you didn't." He rolled onto his back with a groan. "Why the hell did you attack him?" "He was asking for it." He let out a short laugh. "It was stupid. So was provoking him." "You're supposed to make it through this alive," he said sternly, attempting to glare up at her. "And you're not?" she shot back. "That's not the point." "Yes, it is. God's damn it, Matt. We're both going to make it through this." He smiled. "It's nice to see you thinking positively again." In her annoyance, she dabbed too hard, and he winced, biting his lip. "Okay, note to self," he muttered, and she had to snort. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm probably doing more damage than good. My shirt isn't exactly clean anymore." "Don't worry about it. Is there any water left?" "Yeah, I've only used 1 bowl. Would you like some?" Matt painfully pushed himself up, and Morgan slipped her hand in behind his back, helping him sit against the wall, ignoring the way her own arm screamed at her. "Here," she said, offering the water to him. Carefully, he took it with both hands and drank deeply. He finished, handing the bowl back, and let out a breath before glancing at her sharply. "You had some, right?" "Yeah," she lied, "before you woke." She could tell he wasn't satisfied, but didn't push the issue. It wasn't like there's anything they could do about it now. Morgan sat back and eyed the wound. "I think that's the best I can do, I'm afraid." Matt closed his eyes, nodding. "Thank you. Although I maintain you shouldn't have jumped him." Morgan pressed her lips together, shivering slightly at the memory of how goddamn fast Chris had moved. "Morgan?" Matt asked, eye open again, expression worried. "You okay?" "What?" she asked, before realizing she'd lost a minute or two in her own thoughts. "Are you okay?" he repeated. "That head wound looks nasty." She touched it and grimaced again. "It's sore, but not bleeding," she answered with a shrug. "Neither is my arm, but you cleaned that up." "It's a small cut. Yours is deep." He frowned, obviously displeased with her avoidance. "Morgan, I'm not a child, all right?" she snapped, unable to help herself. "I can make my own decisions. I decided to help you. My head isn't that bad." Matt held up his hands. Okay, I'm sorry," he said seriously, closing his eyes. "I don't want you getting hurt on my account." "It wasn't on your account," she muttered. "Then why, if I may ask?" "Chris is an asshole, that's why." Now, Morgan, that's not very nice." She started, whipping around, eyes wide and head whirling. She hadn't heard him enter. Her heart pounded as she stared up at him. Chris grinned, coming and crouching in front of her. "Why do you make me hurt you, Morgan?" She swallowed hard, even more scared of him after watching him move when he'd attacked them. She risked scooting back. "Alone," Matt grunted. "Leave her alone." "Matthew," he shot back, barely glancing at the injured man. "Stay out of this, unless you want me to kill you already." Morgan, as nervous as she was, had the presence of mind to reach back with her hand subtly and punch Matt's foot to shut him up before he got in a fight he was in no shape to hold up. Chris pointed at the floor in front of him. "Come here, Morgan." It was a ridiculous request, intended to force her to obey a command, since she was still basically within reach. She took a deep breath and slowly inched herself forward until she was right in front of him. He touched her damaged head and tutted. "You must have quite the headache, my dear." Chris ran his thumb down from the bruise to the cut, keeping a light but firm pressure until she couldn't hold in a wince anymore, down where the wound was the deepest. Almost casually, he stopped and dug his finger in, twisting. Self-preservation prompted Morgan to try to back away again, but he locked his other arm around her still injured shoulder, effectively pinning her in place. Finally, she couldn't help it and whimpered, biting her lip hard and squeezing her eyes shut. "Malone," Matt began. She could hear him shifting. Then, blissfully, Chris let up the pressure and removed his thumb, allowing the once again fresh injury to leak down the side of her face. Shaking, she opened her good eye, wondering why he'd stopped. He grinned at her, wiped her blood on her shirt, then turned and stood in one fluid motion. "Bring him in," he called. Joe and Kev entered, dragging a limp but familiar form between them. "Russ!" both prisoners cried. The pair dumped him just inside the door, exposing a nasty shoulder injury that still bled as he hit the ground. Morgan scrambled forward, ignoring how undignified it looked. She was surprised Chris didn't stop her. Once she got there, it was hard to actually even see the wound, considering the amount of blood he'd already lost. Morgan didn't waste any time working his shirt over his head as careful as she could. She bundled up, then pressed hard against the injury in an attempt to stop the bleeding. All too soon, though, the dampness seeped through. Feeling decidedly helpless, she watched some of her own blood drip off her nose onto Russ's chest. As it splattered, her anger flared and she looked up at Chris. "He's going to die from blood loss if you don't get us bandages. The same is probably true of Matt and me. So unless you're done playing with all of us, you need to get me something to stop the bleeding. Now," she snapped. For a moment, Chris merely stared down at her, confused. "Why do you care? You said you don't really know him." "Because he's a human being, Chris, and he's done nothing to deserve dying like this. I know you're not a fan of fairness, but maybe you should try the concept on for size." "You're awfully sentimental for your line of work, Morgan. Or has Mr. Lockholm not filled you in on those details? You will watch people be killed, and you will have to kill too. That's what agents do." "Maybe your agents," she said, "but not Colin's. I'm telling you, either you go get me supplies to stop this, or he's dead." "How do you know I don't want him to die?" "Because it's you, and you took the time to bring him here. You want us to stop the bleeding, right?" She gritted in frustration, pressing harder on the wound, ignoring her own quaking arms. "Anyway, you don't do things quick and easy. You'd like to prolong them. Considering how long you've been planning Russ's murder, I seriously doubt you want him to die on the floor like this before you've had as much time to play with him as you have with me or Matt." He stared at her for another moment, confusion back in his face, before nodding. "You're right," he said cheerfully. "I'll go get some bandages. Be good while I'm gone." Chris stepped over Russ and vanished out the door, leaving them alone with the door wide open. Morgan stared after him before laughing shortly and returning her attention to Russ. She fixed her eyes on his chest, watching it rise and fall with each shallow but consistent breath, and hoped it would keep that motion going until Chris returned. "Morgan?" "What?" she said shortly, anger still welling up inside her, which only served to make her headache worse. "Did you demand something from Malone and get it?" She snorted, looking at him. "Used his own desires as motivation, Matt." "Is Russ going to be okay?" he asked, shifting to get a better look. "If I can stop this bleeding, he should live, assuming he hasn't lost too much already." Matt shook his head. "I wonder how Malone caught him." "Either ask Chris when he gets back, or Russ when he wakes," Morgan said shortly, before looking at the door again, knowing the shirt was getting too saturated to do much good. Matt fell silent, catching her tone, and she sighed, squeezing her eyes shut. "I'm going to need your help if he comes through with the bandages. Too much to do too quickly, and not nearly enough hands to do it." Chris reappeared, walked over to her, and dumped an armful of supplies. "You'd better keep him alive," he ordered. Following him was Joe with 2 large buckets of water. She nodded, catching the threat inherent in his words. "I will." He glanced down at Matt, then at her and Russ, and vanished, slamming the door behind him. Morgan shuddered at the noise and had to pause another moment to calm her head and her stomach. Neither one responded very well, but she opened her eye again, taking as deep a breath as possible. "Okay, Matt, I need you to come here and take over keeping pressure with your good arm," she said calmly, pulling up the million lessons her mom had given her over the years. She tested right out of first aid during kin training due to having an extremely competent nurse for a parent. It took a painfully long time for Matt to work his way over to her, but he finally appeared and pressed down cautiously. "Harder," she ordered. "Has to be hard enough to stop as much of the bleeding as possible." He nodded, paling as he viewed Russ's complexion up close. Morgan sat back, ignoring the black dots dancing along the edge of her vision, and pulled one of the larger cloths out of the pile of bandages. She wetted the edges and wiped the blood around and as close to the injury as possible. "Okay, Matt, when I say go, remove the compress. Then, as soon as I have this pad down, put pressure back on with that clean cloth there." She picked up the pad and leaned over him again. "Go." As he pulled it back, Morgan got her first real look at the injury and grimaced. It was deeper than she'd first thought, and Chris had obviously twisted the knife. She slapped the pad down and went searching for something to tie it with while Matt applied pressure. Morgan shooed him away again and tied it down securely, trying to cut off as much of the circulation as possible for now. She touched the wounded area gently and hoped her banding job was adequate. They would have to keep an eye on it. Morgan scanned Russ quickly, but other than the large bruise on the side of his face, she didn't see anything else that needed tending. She sat back, letting out a breath. Let me see your arm now. He watched her with obvious concern. Are you sure you're okay? He asked, and clearly checked the door for Chris first. I'm fine, she said, keeping her voice calm like her mom always had with patience. She wiped her hands on her shirt and scrounged around for more cloth. Let me see it. Without another word, he shifted to allow her access, and Morgan quickly bandaged it up. Tight enough? He nodded before pulling back. There's no point in doing any of the scrapes. They'll heal, or else Malone will make them worse, and they'll actually need help. So now it's your turn to get your head cleaned up. She rolled her eyes half-heartedly at him. It didn't help that she found rolling her eyes made her head throb. She dipped one end of the clean fabric into the bucket of water and dabbed at her head. Every time she touched it, needles of pain ricocheted around about in her skull. Morgan winced, leaning forward and putting a hand on the ground to steady herself as the darkness waltzed brazenly straight across her vision before fading back to the edges again. Gritting her teeth, knowing she needed to get it cleaned, she kept going, also ignoring the way her arm whined in protest from supporting most of her weight. Chris had gotten to that too, slicing off the top layer of skin on her lower arm. Morgan, are you okay? Matt asked again, sounding anxious. I'm okay, she muttered, carefully patting around the wound to suck up more of the blood. Then she reached the part Chris had jammed his thumb into, the part that was radiating pain steadily. She touched it carefully through the cloth and immediately had to bite her lip hard to keep from crying out. The black intensified, and she panted, trying to chase it away. Morgan, stop, okay? Just bandage it up, Matt said, voice sounding strangely distant. I'm okay, she tried to say, but it came out as a weak whimper before she realized her arm had given out and she was heading fast towards the ground. Before she hit, the black crept in yet again and stole her vision completely.